So 2016 Prius, it needs the rear wheel bearing replaced. Okay, so the issue with this wheel is it's got free play, which is this clunkiness. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm able to wiggle the wheel. Of course, the wheel bearing is supposed to spin this way, but it's not supposed to allow you to grab the tire like this and make it clunk around. So we know that's a bad wheel bearing. I'll go ahead and remove the brake caliper first. So now I'll be able to remove the caliper bracket. Which is this. And now my disc should be free. All right, that popped it free. Okay. There's our clunky wheel bearing. That's the play, and it's probably not very much in terms of how much the free play is out here, but if you think about the wheel and how it's kind of a lever arm onto the hub, a little bit of free play here is kind of a lot out at the edge of the wheel, and you can feel that when you're driving, and it's unsafe because the play increases and eventually the assembly falls apart, so you could lose your wheel. It really is something worth fixing if you have a failed wheel bearing that has free play. It's kind of curious that this happened to this car because this has 60,000 miles on it, and my guess is that the wheel ran something over its speed and kind of jarred or damaged the wheel bearing. Okay, so here's our replacement wheel bearing. Does look correct. Now the reason I'm using a used wheel bearing assembly is because this is an ASIN, so this is a factory wheel bearing. These are about $350. There are a lot of cheap wheel bearings out there that cost way less, like maybe $80, and the quality is just night and day. So the quality of the metal and this assembly is far greater on the OEM unit. It's also sometimes difficult to get your hands on the OEM unit. You know, if you go to the dealership, they, in this case, didn't have it in stock. So price-wise and availability-wise, it ended up being easier to get a used unit. Now, these normally last like 200,000 miles, so I'm not worried about the longevity of this used unit as long as it's, you know, has no free play right now, which it doesn't. So as you can see, those bolts are around back. So the back of the trailing arm has 4 bolts that go through it, and that goes into this hub assembly. So once I zap those off, this entire hub will come off. Nice chunky bolts. Now I'll knock this guy out. There we go. So now at this point, I mean, you can barely feel the smallest click when I wiggle it. But again, the wheel acts as sort of a lever arm, so it was really quite a bit of clunkiness out at the edge of the tire. Our tolerance for this is 0. So the amount of free play specified by Toyota is 0. So if you feel any clunkiness in that wheel bearing, get rid of it. So we'll scrub this off a little bit so that the new one slides in there, And I'll scrub this off a bit so that I'm not pounding it back in. Now you saw I was hammering on this hub flange. That's only because I was hammering on a part I'm throwing away. I will not hammer on this hub flange of this bearing that I'm going to be using. So I'll buff it off a little bit with this guy. All right, and same deal over here. And I want this surface to be flat, so I'll go ahead and clean this as well. Now this isn't sandpaper, this is a scrubby pad, and that's important because I don't want to remove metal, I just want to knock the rust off. All right, so we don't want to forget this. I'm going to put a punch through here and kind of knock it in from these ears, and I'll use like a brass punch. All right, so I've started the bolts and just got them kind of finger tight, and now I'm going to push the hub assembly back into that bore. I have a brass punch. I don't want to bend these ears. They are pretty stout, but I'm just going to kind of lightly tap down. You can see it sink down and settle into place. Glasses on. All right, so now I'll run my bolts down and I'll go back and torque them. So again, I really like to use one tool to kind of spin something in, especially when it's bad access, but this thing doesn't have much torque. This is not gonna tighten this down to the torque it needs to be at. So we'll have to come back with a different tool to give it the final snug. All right, I noticed the book time for this job is 1 hour. Seems about right. It's a pretty straightforward job. I went ahead and asked the shop how much they want to do this job, and it was $540. So far we're at $75 for this parts cost, so we're doing really good here. I'll go ahead and snug it up, and then I'll just reassemble. All right, here we go. Rotor. These big chunky bolts that hold the caliper bracket. Okay. Alrighty. Getting there. Caliper goes back. These little guys are my caliper bolts. Okay, so now it's time to kind of pay special attention. This plug is certainly delicate, and there's a certain orientation that this clip has to go. And you know, it's tempting to kind of rush through that last part and just cram it in there. I don't know how many times I've seen pins bent over, plugs snapped off. So even though I'm kind of feeling like I'm on the home stretch here, I will go ahead at this point, slow down, position my light carefully, make sure that that plug seats and that its cover is clicked into place properly. Okay, I got a nice solid click out of that sucker. All right. pretty much there. I'm just gonna put the wheel back on. Now I will go ahead and align this car. I mean, something happened. I don't know how this wheel bearing got wasted so early in the car's life, but it makes me suspicious that this wheel took a serious hit. So I'll go ahead and check the alignment. Wheel bearings and tires are part of our basic safety check. So this car is safe again for long highway trips. If you remember before, the wheel was clunking. Not anymore. Good.
So all said and done, we spent $75 in 1 hour of time and did an essential repair on this car.